Alright, this is GC Rock's 10 must-have builds for beginners. He does know I'm doing this. I've spoken to him. He had a very, very healthy attitude towards it. And just to clarify a few things, the reason I'm doing videos like this at the moment is I'm very, very busy. These take me like 2 hours to do, whereas to make like a full edited video going through stats and number breakdown, we're talking like 10 hours. I just don't have the time at the moment, so I do apologize for doing it this way. I know not everyone likes the whole reaction video thing, but it's just a good way for me to get information out while basically doing it cheap and easy. Sadly, I'm being lazy. I do apologize, but like I said, very, very busy. Anyway, let's get into this. Let's see what we got.
Hi, what's up everyone? Today I am bringing you 10 beginner builds that you're going to want to farm for if you're new to the Division 2. The reason I'm making this video is because I see a lot of people reaching level 40 and they're asking what to do next. And I guess the next thing you need to do is grind out some builds. Now these 10 different build types I'm going to show you today will cover every bit of content in the game, from speedruns for the season, heroic content, legendary content, and even raids and the incursion. So I'd say if you are a beginner to the game, you've just reached level 40, this should be your next step. Try and piece these 10 builds together. They're not the perfect builds by any means, and as you learn your play style and you learn the game a little bit more, you're probably going to make tweaks to these and make the builds how you want. But there are certainly 10 build types that you want to farm for on the Division 2. First up, we probably
Really like the disclaimer. This is one thing, like, people always like, oh, like you're trying to like crap on people's fun, let people play how they want to play. I do let people how they play how they want to play. The problem is they go in with the attitude of the thing they've concocted is the best build ever and everyone should play it the exact same way. What GC Rock has just said is, this is how I like to play. This is how I find it fun. They're not perfect by any measure, but this is what I use. And he's basically saying that these are a template. Go forth, my children, have fun, which is the absolute best way to do it. Okay, if he came in and went, this is the best strikers build, then I could probably sit here and go, no, it's not, and then prove it. But he's not saying that. He's saying this is how I use a strikers build. And I'm hoping as well he would give recommendations on like what you could change. But yeah, anyway, let's get into it.
probably have the most important build that you need in the game, and it is an all red DPS build. If ever you jump in with any raid team or legendary team, incursion team, and you're looking to get help through this content, the number one thing they ask is, do you have a all red striker build? So this is probably going to be your priority. It is going to get you through so much content, and it is a must have. The good news is that this build is super easy to put together. Here's mine on screen.
Interesting way to set it up. I mean, I'm assuming this is just after he's done this legendary mission, so Striker's Chest isn't the worst thing here. Bit weird to be recommending Striker's Chest off the bat, simply just because outside of like incursion or legendary, you don't need it. You'll build up stacks quick enough and do more damage, and then the engagement is over. It's this that I find interesting. Anyway, we'll let him cook.
Here it's 4-piece strikers. You can see I've got the mask, backpack, gloves, and chest piece. I'm taking advantage of the striker backpack talent and the chest talent here. I got the Fox's Prayer knee pads, and I've got a Grupo holster. This is all crit damage and crit chance where I can get it. So I've got crit damage on all the 4 striker pieces. The Fox's Prayer, I've got crit chance and crit damage on the Grupo holster. Now, a lot of people will suggest a Cheska instead of the Grupo, and that is absolutely fine. If you're running with people with a Coyote's mask, though, there's an argument the Grupo can be a little bit better.
No, there isn't. Cheska is always better. Always. The only area where Grupo tends to be better is with just Ouroboros, and that's just because as long as you're SHD 1000 and up, equip an Ouroboros and you've got like 41% crit chance. Add a Cheska, that's 51. I think it's 41. Add a Cheska piece, that's 51% crit chance. You add 1 crit roll, which you would get from this, you're now at like 57% crit chance. Yes, Coyotes, he did mention it, but that's the only area where Grupo wins over Cheska, and that's just because Ouroboros exists. Ouroboros is silly. The rest of the time, Cheska wins 100%. Admittedly, it's not by much. Like, you wouldn't know this unless you really, really want to delve into the nitty-gritties of the math, but Cheska always wins.
The weapons I like to use on this build are weapons like the Ouroboros, the St. Elmo's. You can use any SMG or AR that you like, really. And I love running the secondary weapon as the lefty, which comes with sledgehammer on it, so I can switch to a grenade and this weapon to proc sledge when I need to. This is very handy when I'm running incursions and raids, and it's something I like to do. Specializations that go well with this build are the grenade launcher specialization, the gunner specialization. You can practically put any specialization on that you want, really, to basically gel with whatever playstyle that you have or task at hand. And skill wise, use any skills that you want. I go revive hive, decoy, sometimes I throw an assault turret on. It's entirely up to you, but this is a very good all red DPS build, and as I said, it's going to get you through any content in the game. If you're in our community and you're looking for raid help and incursion help, people will be very happy if you turn up with this build.
Absolutely.
Some alterations that you may want to do depending on the content, though, is I often remove the chest piece, because what the chest piece does is it basically increases your striker's gamble from 100 to 200 stacks, and it's an argument a lot of the time that the 200 stacks is just a little bit difficult to maintain. You know, you're just not reaching the 200 stacks, and it's kind of pointless having them. So take out the striker chest from time to time, throw on another striker piece elsewhere, and then you can change this piece to something else. You can make it a glass cannon striker build, an obliterate striker build. You could do all sorts with it. And on this version of the build of the Grupo holster, you'll see my crit hit chance is low at 34.6%. I've got 186.8% crit hit damage. Again, I run a lot with people with coyotes, so that crit hit chance is increased.
I get what he's saying, and he's not wrong, and there are teams out there that can make excellent use of the coyotes buffs. The issue is, it takes serious organisation to be able to use the long coyotes buffs, because that's what you're going to be relying on. If you're this low on crit chance, you're going to want to be relying on the long coyote buff, which means you need to be hitting targets 25 meters plus away. Especially in something like Legendary DUA, that's not happening. Going back to my point with Cheska, if you just swapped around Cheska and kept the crit chance attachments and rolls and mods and whatnot you've already got, you're now going to be at like essentially 45% crit chance. Add in the medium coyotes buff, which is between 15 and 25 meters, which is a lot more achievable, have a greater uptime and just generally easier to maintain. You're now going to be at 55% crit chance, which is going to be a lot better. So yeah, that's the, if you wanted to keep it the way he's going, the thing I would suggest you change first would be Grupo. Take Grupo out, put Cheska in. That's just my advice. If he's able to manage and maintain someone with the long coyotes buff, then fine, great. I don't see it really being feasible for a lot more of the casual players. I think maintaining long buff is generally more of a speed runner type thing. That's just me though.
Through that, you can adjust through mods and other roles if you want that crit hit chance to be at 60% cap or not. You can adjust that yourself. The second build that I'm going to recommend to you is a healer build. A healer is very valuable to any team, whether it's legendary content, raid content, incursion content, so much content. And a lot of people don't like doing it. So if you put a healer build together and you get good at it and you enjoy it, you're going to make yourself very desirable within our community. You will be welcomed into a lot of raid teams, a lot of incursion teams and legendary teams. And you'll have a lot of friends. So I highly recommend putting together a healer build. The most common healer...
Oh, GC, my soul, man. Are you okay? I'm assuming this is the named one, Hermano, for, is it Perfect Overclock? Please don't. Please don't. I'm not saying it's bad, but it does have a use, but 99% of the time it's doing nothing. Outsum it with Opportunistic, or the setup, preferably the setup for Perfect Oppo. You do not need to get a unicorn roll. Ideally, you should be running Technician. That gives you another skill tier. It will give you one blue. It just Oppo, so much more useful. So much more useful, especially when using Scorpio, because that's a 20% amp. That's a 15% amp. That's huge. That's huge. That's like 38% increase in team DPS, then add in FI itself for the total. Like the rest of it's fine. It's just that backpack. That hurts.
The build right now on the game is the Future Initiative healer build, and this has been this way for some time. So you'll want to farm out 4 pieces of Future Initiative. You'll have it on the mask, chest, holster, and knee pads. Just roll repair skills on each of these pieces. They already come.
Interesting mod choice. You don't need repair skill that high. Unless he's spamming overcharge. The only reason you would do that is if you're spamming overcharge. Like every time overcharge comes up, you press it again to refresh your cooldowns. That's generally not a good way to go, especially as a healer. Typically, we like to time our overcharges so that we're getting them placed at certain intervals to help bolster the overall team's effect for a specific duration of time at a specific point. So going repair skills, you're typically going to want to go skill haste for your mods.
With skill tier, and where you can place mods, you'll want to place repair skills. You're using the chest piece from Future Initiative as well for the ground control buff that you get. So ground control on Future Initiative basically increases all of your team's damage by 15% when you're at full armor. But with the chest piece, you get tactical superiority, which increases that from 15% up to 25% extra damage. It is very, very good. Works very well on raids and incursions.
That's just a slight terminology thing. Although, if you've got nothing else going on, 25% total weapon damage is going to equal 25% more damage. But typically, players will have other things going on within their overall builds, vigilance, concussion, anything else that offers total weapon damage, which means returns by scale. You're not going to get that. It would just be easier to say if he just mentioned it was total weapon damage rather than anything else. So that's just a terminology mix up, but yeah.
So you have those 4 pieces. You then have the BTS U-gloves. And the reason
They
you're
are a
using
must.
these is because of the talent. You're able to destroy your hive every 120 seconds, which will create an overcharge for your whole squad. So they can use overcharge skills for 15 seconds. You can also, and say they are using revive hives and they lose a revive hive, it's going to refresh that for them and also refresh on that overcharge. It's a very handy tactic that we all use with this build. And as for the backpack, you used to use Alps Summit with skill haste repair.
You still do. No one really uses this outside of very specific niche areas. Again, we're looking at speed runs, but typically in those areas, you won't be doing that tactics. Like we use this backpack for perfect overclock, for Sniper Alley and Iron Horse for destroying the pipes. We don't use the rockets. We use Sleipnir with a very specific build, and we use this for the reload speed because that's basically the only benefit. The reduced cooldown is basically non-existent. I think at max it's like you get like roughly 2 seconds out of it before it actually does anything. So the main thing you really want is the plus 30% reload speed, which to only be active and plausible to use within a 50-meter radius of this person's deployed skills is a bit twitchy. So unless you're hunkering down and holding a position like you are in Sniper Alley, this doesn't do much. You'd be so much better off with opportunistic.
Skills I'm used to throw on opportunistic talent is still good for a healer build, but also perfect overclock is as well, and that comes on the Brazos piece. So either farm yourself an Alps backpack with repair skills, which is the most important, skill haste as well if you can get it, a repair skill mod on there, and either go for opportunistic or perfect overclock. Opportunistic is going to increase the team damage if you're shooting the enemy with a shotgun or sniper rifle, but perfect overclock will basically give allies within 15 meters increased reload speed, and the cooldowns will be quicker as well. So it's very handy. I quite like that. And you could also go as well on top of that. You could go perfect opportunistic instead as well.
That's where you should
you're going to use on your healer build is the Scorpio. This is just obvious, really. It's a weapon that's going to give your team extra damage when you keep on shooting at your target. It offers a lot of enemy debuffs. That's a great weapon to choose. You could also go your secondary lefty again for the sledgehammer talent, as we've already discussed on the other build. It's very handy. Again, throw a grenade, proc sledgehammer. It's a ton of damage. Survivalist is a great specialization for a healer build because it increases your outgoing healing. And the skills you want to run on a healer build is the Restorer Hive, and you want to run the Reinforcer Chem Launcher. Next up, I advise creating a tank build. In fact, I have 2 different tank builds for you. Both have different purposes. We have a hazard protection tank build, but also a protection from elite tank build. So let's get
No, actually, I'll leave that
into these. The hazard protection tank build is fantastic for raid content, especially on Iron Horse. There are moments on Iron Horse that you want a lot of hazard protection, 100% in fact, and this build gives you that. It allows you to do certain roles on that raid with ease, and this is how you can piece the hazard protection tank build together. You can go 3-piece Gilligard. So if we have a look at Gilligard for 3 pieces here, we're getting total armor, health, and armor regen. You also want to go Bellstone Armory for 1 piece. This gives you armor regen, and you want 2 pieces of the Cavalier gear set. This will give you 30% hazard protection. Now, as for the rolls on this build, if we have a look at the Gilla chest, you want to roll the build to armor regen and hazard protection, and anywhere that can take a mod slot, throw on protection from elites.
Protection from elites on has builds are quite strange. For the example here, he's up against Pfizer, a boss in the Iron Horse raid, with a flamethrower. The initial hit of the flamethrower, because it's a named elite, the initial hit from the flamethrower, the damage, the shot essentially, is going to be affected by protection from elites. However, the burn that shot is going to be applying isn't. This is generally why, because in areas like this, it's not the actual hit that's going to kill you. It's going to be the tick that kills you. It's generally why we don't put PFE mods on this. There's 1,000,001 ways to make Hasbro builds. This is just one of them. Generally speaking, we run demo because that gives 20% fire resistance. I think some groups might run Cavalier now, but we generally don't. We generally spec mostly into Hasbro and armor regen, and the remaining mods, you get yourself to like 90% Hasbro, and the remaining mods will be the individual hazard that you need. Fire being covered by Demolitionist, that will actually take you to like overall, so that would be 110, but obviously you can't get to 110. And then you put like an Ensnare mod in, a Disrupt mod in, and like a Shock mod in. That's generally it. The overall regen that you'll get from that will be more than enough. Typically, Mosquito is worthless, I'm afraid to say. Sorry, GC. This weapon is doing nothing for you. You would want Ravenous. For this scenario, you want Ravenous. Use Ravenous to build up your bonus armor to allow you to allow your armor regen to heal you through whatever damage you have taken, along with your overall hazard protection, basically stopping it. So all you need to worry about is the initial hit, which is immediately covered by 1, your bonus armor, 2, your armor regen, and 3, your overall armor value. Very easy to do, and obviously you've got Vanguard here with a shield to help proc it, and then Adrenaline Rush to stay in proximity. That's basically all you need. I feel like this is more complex than it needs to be, as well as you just don't need PFE in this scenario. You just don't. PFE is barely doing anything. About 90% of the damage that you are going to be taking is going to be coming from the status hit itself, which is not affected by PFE. It's the initial hit that would proc the status on you that will be affected by PFE. So I feel like this is kind of, more complex than it needs to be. Although there is an argument for a need of tank builds, I wouldn't recommend them for new players just because they can get, I mean, obviously this is not the most I've had to say so far. They get very, very twitchy on how they are built and how they are needed to perform. But then generally speaking as well, you only really need them in the Iron Horse raid. Outside of that, not really.
Actually using the chill out mask here, if you've got access to this chill out mask, it takes away one of the attributes but allows you to have an extra mod. Definitely go for that, but if you don't have a chill out mask, then you can't. A normal Gilligard mask will do absolutely fine. You see I've got hazard protection there with 2 protection from elites, and it's like that across the build. If we go to the Cavalier, I focus on hazard protection, and what you're looking for here is 100% hazard protection across the board. So if we go and have a look at the defensive stats, you'll see here that I have got hazard protection at 94.
This is what I would recommend you run 3-piece Gila. You don't need the weird mask. Just Hasbro armor regen rolls. Because you got Demolitionist, Ravenous, and then 3-piece 511, which gives health, incoming repairs, and another 20% hazard protection. Incoming repairs is kind of handy because if you do need to be healed, that's a multiplier to being healed, which is great. We've also got another 90% health coming along as well now, which is pretty good. 2% armor regen, along with all the armor regen rolls here. But the main thing you want to notice is my dumbass head's in the way. Over here, you might notice we got hazard protections at 90, but we got another 20% burn resist from demo, another 10% shock resist, another 10% disrupt resist, and then there should be another one in snare. I'm not sure where it is. It's not on the list, but yeah, we got an ensnare mod there, as you can see, a shock mod, a disrupt mod. This generally makes it a bit easier. You don't need these to be maxed out. As you can see, look, we're at 90% Hasbro here, and if we come over to this sheet, hopefully you can see, like, for burn, you need to be at 91.4. For ensnare, you need to be at 93. For shock, you need to be at 86. So even at 90% Hasbro, you're maxed out on shock anyway. So you probably could swap that around, put something else in, maybe get some blind and death in there. Like, you don't need maxed out mods. Like, you mostly need them to be about 4, maybe 5%. The only one that's going to probably trip you up would be this one, Disrupt, with 95.8.
0.6. That's just because I haven't optimized everything yet. It'll be 100 once I have, but that's for bleed resistance, blind death resistance, burn resistance, disorient resistance, disrupt resistance, ensnare, and poison. With the Gilligard chest piece, you want to farm for the named version of it called the Pointman. On this, you'll get perfect Vanguard, so when you put out your shield, you're going to be giving your whole team some extra bonus armor based off of your armor cores. You can do that every 25 seconds, which is very good. And on the backpack, just to increase some survivability for yourself, Adrenaline Rush is brilliant. Again, certain roles of the raid will require to be close to some bosses, so this Adrenaline Rush is just going to help yourself stay alive, basically. So they're the two talents that I use on this build. As for the specialization, you can go with what you want, really. I'm not sure why I've got a survivalist on this right now. Probably for the extra protection from elites. But you could also go the firewall, because I know the firewall will give your team extra damage to targets that you're within 10 meters of. And there might be some other perks on other specializations that you might enjoy as well. My weapon setup, there's multiple things you can do with this hazard tank build. The Ravenous is a great exotic that can basically give you more survivability again. You can just keep on proccing the bonus armor on yourself, practically making yourself invincible at times. It's not really needed though, and sometimes I just like using the Mosquito to grab some aggro. So I throw on the Mosquito as my sidearm. I have the Lefty on as well for, again, the Sledgehammer talent if I want to use that. And my secondary, it doesn't really matter. I think I've got a Famos there because on the Williams boss fight on Iron Horse, I'm the one that's shooting the letters, and I just need something that's fast, fire rate, and auto for that. The skills that I use on this build is obviously the shield, to proc Vanguard, and to be a tank and give myself a lot more survivability.
Weird bit of advice: if you're doing letters, Bullet King. I know, but like you don't reload, fast fire rate. Just Bullet King. Remove Mosquito, put Bullet King there. You'll be so much better off. You don't have to worry. You can also get it done quicker as well. You can just walk around in a circle shooting.
And a Revive 5 in case I need to get myself and my teammates up. The next tank build is probably one of my favorite builds I've created. I put this PFE tank.
Okay, I'm weird with PFE builds. Hold on, I'm going to move my grid square back over. Actually, no, I'll put myself in this corner so you can at least see the build. PFE builds. There's nothing wrong with PFE builds. I use PFE builds. I'm pretty sure everyone has a PFE build, and I do recommend you at least get a PFE build at some point. My issue is just the simple fact it says 10 must-have builds for beginners. PFE builds will typically normally come with 2 or sometimes even 3 improvised pieces. Improvised are very expensive to make, especially to get them how you want them. 2, very expensive to optimize and recalibrate. 3, damn hard to actually get the roles you want maxed out. Not only do you need to craft it with the specific roles you need, or at least close to, and then recalibrate, you're going to need your library to be pretty full, or at least very close to being maxed out, so you can at least optimize them to a point of where they're going to be of use. So my issue isn't the fact of it being a PFE tank build. My issue is more recommending a PFE tank build using improvised pieces for new players, for beginners. There is a myriad of better or other things to spend your resources on at that point. 100% disagree with this. In fact, I will be skipping to the next one, which is a drone killer build. It's nothing against the build. This looks mostly fine. Bit questionable on the Regnbue, though I imagine he mostly uses this in Legendary, which the explosive resistance could come in handy. Probably be better with 2 Golan, actually, get more armor regen on. And then we're using Scorpio. The extra status isn't the worst thing ever. But yeah, my issue is more recommending a build that uses improvised pieces for new players. So yeah, nothing wrong with the build. I'm not going to go over the information just because I just completely disagree with recommending a PFE build for new players. It's literally it. Sorry, GC.
Reaching the halfway mark now, and this is a very specific build. You're only ever really going to use it on the Dark Hours raid, I imagine. But it's called the Drone Killer build, and it's a task that is needed to make the final boss of Dark Hours much easier. You'll be in charge of just destroying all of the drones that come out of Razorback, and believe me, they are annoying if you don't have this build. So again, it's a great build to have if you're looking to take on all of the content in this game. There are a couple of ways you can do this build.
There are a couple of ways you can do this build, but this is the best way to do this build. 4-piece hardwired, a Wyvern with glass cannon, and then BTSU gloves. And I'm 100% on board with this build. It's pretty easy to make. You just need hardwired, which always comes with a skill tier, so you can just recal to skill damage. I can't remember what you put in the mods. I think normally you put PFE mods in, or weirdly, armor on kill. I can't remember if it still affects pulse, the jammer pulse, but like it just helps you stay alive because you don't really need more skill damage and you don't need skill haste with this build. Just keep using your skills and hardwired takes care of the rest. Wyvern chest with glass cannon and then a skill damage roll is great, and then after that you're basically fine. This is a very good build to have, as well as everyone will love you. No one likes playing the drone killer build. It is really boring. So the more people that can have this build and the more we can rotate it, take it in turns, the happier I will be, certainly, because I tend to get lumped with playing drone killer and I find it quite... So yeah, more people getting recommended this build, 100% on board with.
I've had different variances in the past. The most important thing is that you've got your jammer pulse back quick enough for the time that the drones keep on spawning in, and hardwired enables you to do that. But on top of that, you need a certain amount of skill damage on your build to make sure those drones die. So depending on your watch level, you can just fall short of this. So if you are using a build like this,
if you are falling short of that damage, Scorpio is a nice choice here, but typically we go with Capacitor because you can stack up on the Razorback itself, which is another 60% skill damage, which helps, you know, just mitigate lack of SHD, etc., etc. So would recommend Capacitor over Scorpio here just for that specific point.
And you're not killing the drones, you need to find a way to increase that skill damage. I think it's 73% skill damage you need to kill them. I want to say, don't quote me, no, it's a number someone told me a while ago.
I don't even remember.
It's there or thereabouts. So let's have a look at the build. You're going to be having 4-piece hardwired, and the reason for that is feedback loop, which is the 4-piece talent. Basically, whenever you use or cancel a skill, your other skill's cooldown is automatically reduced by 30 seconds while increasing total skill damage and repair by 10 seconds for 20 seconds. And this is what we use to make the jammer pulse come back in time to take out the drones that keep on spawning on Razorback. We got the mask, backpack, knee pads, and holster. You want to roll on skill damage on every single one of these 4 pieces. And with the backpack talent there, it decreases the feedback loop cooldown from 20 seconds to 10 seconds. So you definitely want that backpack. If you run it with the BTSU gloves, you're going to also be able to proc overcharge for your team as well, which is quite handy, especially on the Razorback. If anyone loses the hive, You could just destroy your hive, it'll give them their hive back, give your squad some more survivability. And as for the chest piece, we're going Wyvern for the skill damage. And you can see the skill damage and repair skills rolled on that. I've got a repair skills mod as well. And I've got glass cannon. The reason we're going glass cannon is because all damage you deal is amplified by 25%. All damage you take is amplified by 50. We're more interested about the damage that we're given because that includes skill damage. Talking about before, trying to get that skill damage up, this is going to help you a lot. And the skills you want to run in your drone killer build is a Restorer Hive and the Jammer Pulse. The Restorer Hive, when you put it down, you can just give some heals to your team, which is why we're going for repair skill mods on the slots that can take mods. And the Jammer Pulse is what you're going to use to destroy the drones. Every single time they spawn, you'll hold this in, the radius will extend, and as it pops off, it will kill all drones, making sure your team can just focus on the other mechanics. I've gone survivalist specialization again for this. I'm guessing this is for the outgoing healing.
No, you go survivalist here because the way in which we break Razorback, the first shot, after you do all the mechanics, 2 panels are exposed. To destroy the first side of panel, you use the survivalist crossbow to break it open, and then your partners on the other circles will be demolitionist to fire grenades in. The healing actually isn't really important here. Waves are very small. The only time you'll ever really struggle is if you're like quite an inexperienced team, as well as managing the rotation. The overall add and the add density isn't difficult at all. So you don't really need that much healing. If you do, press V or press your use a medkit button, ideally. But yeah, the crossbow is to break open Razorback. That's basically it. But yeah, that very good showing, very good build. The only thing I would suggest, it's not like a point down or anything, it's just obviously GC's got the damage he needs to be able to kill the drones, so he's opted for Scorpio. If you don't have the damage to kill the drones, don't use Scorpio, use Capacitor.
To buff those heals to my team. Heading into the second half of this video now and the next 5 builds. So far we've covered builds that are great for legendary and raids and things like that. And you'd think that with the toughest content in the game, the build's good enough for that, would suit easier content. But you would be mistaken. For the easier content or more casual content, there's far better builds to use than the builds that you'd use for the tougher ones. Starting with like a speedrun build. Every season on the Division 2, they give us loads of speedrun leagues. And there's a specific build that works very, very well on these. So I'm going to share that with you first. This content is often making you play it on hard.
Oh, my feelings. My feelings. I'm joking, I don't have any. Okay, right. Sorry, GC. The league speedruns, the easiest way to get rid of them is just Eclipse. Easiest way, by far. Okay, you don't need anything weird or fancy, anything like this. Just Eclipse. Just throw a fire sticky at them and then keep running. Room has died, door opens up, next room, another friggin' fire chem, everything dies. Like, it's so much quicker than what this could be performing. 2, going back to what you said on the All Red Strikers build, of how it can be difficult to get 200 stacks utilising the Strikers chest. That's in legendary and potentially heroic content. Now you're recommending Strikers chest on what is literally hard difficulty. We can see it down here. I'm not sure if anyone else can see it, but if I just like the icon there, hard, and you're running a Strikers chest. You would just be so much better off just running 4-piece Hunter's Fury and then just run, I don't know, Cheska Grupo, 2 Bellstone, 2 Palisade, like literally anything. It's going to perform better. You're less reliant on the striker stacks and more getting the direct amp from Hunter's Fury, which for doing hard content is going to be more damage, quicker to get up, at my age at least, as well as a lot easier to maintain. Like you're mixing 2 gear sets. Mixing 2 gear sets is never a good idea. It just doesn't give you as much as what you think. You'd be better off just going Cheska Grupo here, or you could go Sokolov and Providence. That would give you more. Because then you're getting 10% crit chance, 15% headshot damage, 15% weapon damage, crit chance, crit damage, or whatever you wanted. And then on the Sokolov, you're getting your SMG damage, 15% critical hit damage, and then your 2 attribute rolls. Like, it would just be so much better. Mixing in 2 gear sets like this is just a no-go. It's just not worth it. Right, so this is what he's got. We'll probably put this to D-Talk. And we're at 58, 112, 70. Okay. And yeah, right. So if we just go Sokolov and then Providence. Damage, crit chance, crit damage. We could probably change these now to crit damage as well. Yeah, we're at 68. We're miles over. Crit damage, crit damage, crit damage. 68, 161, and then 85. And all of that for the price of dropping 5% SMG damage. So, like, obviously, like, we're massively over, but, like, that's just how easy it is just to outperform mixing 2 gear sets. It's just not worth it. It really isn't, I'm afraid. Anyway, we'll move across.
The 7th build I'm going to show you today is something I call the cheese build, but I know a lot of people love it. This is perfect for open world farming when you're solo or in a group of 2 or maybe 3 maximum. The higher the group number, the more HP on the enemies, and it actually makes this a little bit more difficult to use the way it works. We'll discuss it in a few moments. What's great about this build is you can do heroic open world activities and you can fly through them, earning an insane amount of XP very, very quickly. The best way to earn XP in the Division 2 is open world activities and control points and just going around them and
public
around them.
execution
And this
and bounty
build allows you to do that very quickly, even with directives if you want to. And here it is. I call it the hotshot cheese build. This is slightly different again to how others do things. I like adding my own spin on stuff.
I think the only issue I've got with it is determined. I can't remember. I don't use Hotshot. I don't remember what the backpack gives. The use of the gloves is interesting, especially with what we saw what he was doing here. He wasn't even aiming. He was just like hip firing round the corner. Wasn't really paying attention to how many shots he got, but he killed a few things. So I don't know. That potentially could be worthwhile. I don't know. I just don't like determined, but we'll hear him out.
There's different ways to do this, but it does work and it works great. Now, you used to use this build with the White Death named sniper. In a recent update, there's a new sniper that people like using, and the sniper rifle they like to use is the SRS-A1, I believe. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong in the comments and let people know what the...
There's a few. The SRS-A1, the SR1... any of the M700 or Model 700 series. Although that being said, the White Death hasn't changed. The rest of the weapons have just been buffed. White Death was one-shotting things for years. So White Death is still a very, very viable option. You're literally splitting hairs for the sake of splitting hairs at this point. Not GC, I mean like in general, over the whole MMR thing. It's mostly just going to come down to how you feel. One of the main reasons I wanted to get away from White Death is, especially if you're trying to react as quick as possible, the reticule shrink to get a pinpoint shot on the White Death is one of the slowest, which made it feel very inaccurate. The M700 Carbon doesn't have this issue as well. All MMRs have this issue, but the M700 isn't as bad for it, which is one of the reasons I swapped over to the M700. One of the reasons a lot of people like the SR1 is you can get a 10-round mag on the thing. I don't know about why people are going for the SRS-A1. There's a plethora of different reasons, so pick one. And a lot of people just swear at sticking with Mantis as well. So just pick one, play around with it, see what you like.
Third sniper is. But the roles that you want on this is marksman rifle damage, headshot damage, damage to target out of cover, and the talent you want is determined. This is where the cheese falls into place. So what determined does is after killing an enemy with a headshot, the next shot landed on an enemy will be a guaranteed headshot. You could shoot him in the toe, it's going to count as a headshot. Now the thing with this talent right now is it's broken, and the devs did fix it, but they had a lot of backlash as people were having fun. So they've left it broken. So what you need to do with this is get the one headshot kill, and then every body shot after that will count as a headshot. It doesn't refresh. It's meant to refresh though. You're meant to go headshot, body, headshot, body. But in this instance, you can just go headshot and then keep on hitting body to get kill after kill after kill. You can even miss shots. If you miss a shot, no bother. Just aim again, hit them, they'll die. The secondary I like to run on this build is just like an assault rifle or something like that, just in case some enemies do get very close.
I don't know why. This is the fifth time I've seen him running a FAMAS with... That's strained. I'm pretty sure that's strained. But yeah, like running a FAMAS with strained on a build that isn't using crit. And it's really bothering me. GC, can you please, can you get one with Optimist on it, please? Please. Just for these. Please. It's bothering. Like, my OCD is kicking in and I'm about to cry.
And the busy little bee is what I use as my sidearm. When you start an encounter, you could just proc a few busy little bee shots off, which is just going to increase that damage. Basically, each shot to a different target gives 1 stack, up to 10, and each stack will give you 20% weapon damage increase. So proc a...
It's an amp, by the way. Busy little bee is an amp. It's the reason the devs hated it when the speedrunners started using busy little bee cheese, because it is an amp.
Few of them, and then your first sniper shot is going to hit very, very hard, and that works very well with how we make the build. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to start with the chest piece. It's the chain killer named Walker and Harris Co. chest piece. It gives you weapon damage. You want weapon damage on the core attribute, headshot damage and weapon handling on the secondary attributes there, and you want a headshot damage mod this build.
Typically with these styles of builds, we do recommend headshot weapon handling. Okay, it just makes the build easier to use and maintain. However, if you're some genius level crack shot, you don't need weapon handling. You don't need it. I know a few people that put armor on kill here. They run with like 2 armor on kill rolls. It's not a lot, but it's just that little bit extra. Another one that a lot of people like to run is crit chance for some weird reason. So they do headshot crit chance. There's a plethora of things that people like to do. One of the things that I like to do is I like to put repair skill in, because typically if I'm sniping, which is very rarely, I'll have the fixer drone behind me on my head, and because I take ages to take my shot, so I'll be taking hits, and the fixer drone is going to be repairing me while getting it. It just helps out. But then in order to do that, you will need to be comfortable with your weapon and with your build. Weapon handling is the go-to because it makes things easier. But if you don't feel you need it, pick a role, dude. Pick a role. One of the best players I know for a laugh runs health. Health, because he's crazy. He's obviously German. But yeah, like, you don't need it. I would recommend it. I'm not saying like he's wrong for recommending this. I'm just saying, like, depending on your level of play, you don't need weapon handling. Theoretically, you don't need it. It helps, though. It really does help. And it's also going to be dependent on the weapon. Like, if you're running an SVD MMR build, weapon handling, you need the weapon handling. But if you're running something that's a lot more comfortable, a lot more easier, you've got a lot of practice with it, play around with it. You don't necessarily always need it.
Builds all based around headshot damage. Perfect Headhunter comes with a chain killer. Basically, as you keep on stacking these headshot kills, your damage is just going to go up and up and up. You'll be able to one-shot named enemies. It gets that high. The rest of the build looks like this. You want 4-piece hotshot. We've got the mask with headshot damage and headshot damage mod and weapon damage, and it follows suit with the backpack, the knee pads, and the holster. How hotshot works is you basically get marksman rifle damage, handling, headshot damage, and you get the headache talent. First headshot with an MR will increase the next headshot by 20%. Second consecutive headshot with an MR will give 10% armor, and then the third consecutive headshot will refill the magazine, and then from the fourth headshot forwards, agents get all three. So while you're using this build and you keep on getting these headshots by hitting the body, you're getting all these buffs as well, and it works very, very well. You get the blessed talent on the backpack where agents can miss a headshot before resetting the cycle. So where I said you can miss a headshot before, it didn't really matter. That is true to an extent. You'll still get your kills, but you will lose some of these procs if you miss one. This allows you to miss one shot before you...
Where this comes in handy, the blessed talent, is particularly if you're playing solo and like a chunga or a rusher with a helmet comes along, or one of the True Sons LMG gunners will come along. Obviously, like if you're playing determined, no matter where you hit them, it's going to hit the head and it will probably break the helmet and not kill them. This at least mitigates that, because rather than starting from scratch, that should, I think, I don't use hotshot a lot, but that should mitigate the loss of you breaking that helmet, and then you can just fire straight back in while still having the hotshot bonuses active. And as long as that shot then kills, which if you're lucky it should, you're basically straight back in with zero loss. You can just keep the momentum going. So as much as I kind of like how this talent works, I really do feel like with something like Determined, it's just aimbot with hacks now. At least that's just how I feel.
You do though, so it's good to have. And where I do things a little bit different is I wear the exotic rugged gloves. So normally people won't even be bothered about the backpack. They'll have a hotshot glove and go a rolledy backpack with vigilance. But you've got enough damage on this build, and what I love about the rugged gloves is that you can blind fire, and it's so accurate, even with this sniper. I'm hoping in the clip in the bottom left here, you're seeing some clips of me blind firing with it. So this is real good for survivability, especially if you're playing solo, heroic with directives, enemies are getting up on top of you, and you've got all your buffs. You can just blind fire and they're all going to die very, very quickly while you can't take shots yourself. I love the addition to the build. But yeah, it's up to you how you want to make it. The skills I use is the decoy, the revive 5, and I've got the sharpshooter specialization because that increases my headshot damage and accuracy and things like that. My marksman rifle. We have a look at my stats here. You can see we're not bothered about crits at all, but I've got 285.5% headshot damage on the build. Build number 8 is a very, I'm going to say, specialist build. I've never been able to play this build because I need the patience to practice. I always kill myself with it. So the gameplay might not be great, and the build I've added my own spin on as I have with others. But
I'm hoping this is just a confusion of terminology, because from what I'm looking at, he's not running a CC build and he's not running a fire build. I'm not sure how he has this set up. We'll have to have a look. I'm assuming this is just a confusion of terminology.
It's a great build and people love using this. This build is a crowd control build. You can use it in PvP, you can use it in Rage, you can use it in Legendaries, you can use it in speedruns. You can use it in so much. Countdown, Summit. It's game ride. You can use this anywhere. When you get good at it, again, people love to have you in the squad. It's all about learning the spawn points. It's all about being able to hit those spawn points. And you can clear waves of enemies very, very quickly and be a great support to your squad. If you're running with, say, some DPS players and a healer, you can tackle some tough content very, very quickly with this build. Now, again, I've kind of added my own spin onto this build. I'm not sure if this is how people make it, but this does work. Drop your builds down in the comments if you want to give some.
Okay, Firewall. I'm aware someone's going to argue it. Due to the increase in burn duration, Firewall by far beats everything else. The only reason where Survivalist comes into effect is because the crossbow is easier at breaking chungas, but if you're playing in a team, they need to break the chungas, you just spread the fire. Skill-wise, if you're playing a pyro build, you want the Firestarter Chem and the Burn Sticky. Going back to his footage here, I'll just mute it. But as he enters this room, he could have cleared this so much easier. Put your crosshair over this guy here, fire the burn sticky, detonate it. That would have cleared the entire room, rather than doing this. Wasn't enough burn, didn't spread enough. If you got the ones up here, would have spread. And I'm not sure what the Jammer Pulse is doing here. Obviously, Warhounds are a thing, but this is the downside of playing a Pyro build. And even if you were to Jammer Pulse it, it's not like you're going to be doing that much anyway. I don't know why I've been going back to the build. So 4-piece Eclipse with the backpack and chest is correct. Electric or Golan, but they both offer the same. Electric is easier to farm. And obviously, Vial Mask. This is your Pyro setup for dealing damage. For a CC build, you want the Foam and either Jammer or EMP Sticky. You would do 4-piece Eclipse, the Habsburg named backpack for perfect creeping death, and then you would do, ideally you would want to go an improvised piece because it is better, but if you can't get that, a Hanayu piece for the skill haste. That's it. I think there's been a little bit of a confusion on this one. I'm aware he likes to put a spin on something, but I'm just kind of, I don't know, like my soul hurt a little bit when he says CC build and he isn't showing an actual CC build. I mean, there are a myriad of ways you can run the Pyro builds. I know some people that like to run Memento here, which can be very good. It's slow to start, but once you get up and running, it's pretty good. I know others that like to run like the drone with the Firestarter Chem. That's perfectly fine. But generally speaking, you want Firewall, Capacitor with the damage to armor on. You need to keep the damage to armor, by the way. Capacitor with damage to armor, Sticky, Fire, Burn Sticky, and then the Firestarter Chem. That's the Pyro build.
And create these builds into better builds yourself. Well, here it is. We've got the Vial Mask. It's an exotic mask. It has status effects, hazard protection, throw a skill haste mod on there. You get toxic delivery. Basically, status effects also apply a damage over time debuff to the targets, and the total damage dealt is equal to 50% of your concussion grenade damage. And then you want 4 pieces of Eclipse Protocol. We got the Eclipse Protocol backpack, gloves, chest, and holster. Every single one of these is going to have status effects rolled on as the attribute. Put skill haste in any mod slots that you can. And what Eclipse Protocol does is you get status effect for wearing 2 pieces. 3 pieces gives you skill haste and hazard protection. 4 pieces gives you the indirect transmission talent, where your status effects are now spread on kill to all enemies within 10 meters and refresh 50% of the duration. It's very good. And with the backpack, you get
that refresh of the duration is also the reason you want Firewall. Another 30% increase in duration just means you can spread more. It equates to more damage to a point of where the moment it spreads once, that 10% amp you get from survivalist to status enemies means nothing. It pales in comparison.
The Symptom Aggravator, which amplifies all damage you deal to status affected targets by 30%. And the chest gives you the talent Proliferation, which increases indirect transmission range from 10 meters to 15 meters and refresh percentage from 50% to 75%. I say the chest piece is very important for this build. Backpack, I'm not so sure. So you can play around with that. Maybe there's another.
For the Pyro build, backpack is very important. That's literally 30% of your overall damage. It's a 30% amp to everything you do with this style of build. For an actual CC build with foam, the idea isn't for you to be doing damage in the first place, so it's not important at all.
A backpack with a talent you might want to throw on this build. I'm not so sure. But the final piece that I use is the electric knee pads. It gives you 10% status effects. I've got skill haste and status effects rolled onto that. And that is the build. I run the Scorpio as my main. I've got the secondary as the mechanical animal with future perfection, so I can proc overcharge at times if I get some kills. And the specialization is the survivalist. I think I'm letting my team do extra damage to status affected targets with that specialization, so it works very well. Sidearm don't really matter. I've got incendiary grenades, and you.
Okay, sidearm doesn't really matter. Yes and no, and it's depending on how you want to play, particularly as well if you're playing group or solo. If you're playing solo, this is another reason you want to go Firewall, because sidearm really does matter. Get the Firewall shotgun. for primer rounds, and this will allow you to set Warhounds and the Chungers from the cleaner faction on fire. These things are normally immune to being on fire. The Firewall shotgun, you can put them on fire. It's another reason for Firewall. Typically, we would run Capacitor. This allows us to stack up more damage from the burn itself, because skill damage will affect the status. And then for your secondary, I like Everlasting Gaze just because it's something different, but typically you will want to go with a rifle with Perpetuation, which is a 50% increase in duration and a 50% increase in status effect. I just like Everlasting Gaze because it's perfect. The cooldown, the difference between the two is the cooldown. Normal Perpetuation is a 20-second cooldown. Perfect is 16. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate.
You can run this build with any sort of status effect skills that you want. So you've got the Riot Foam, you've got the Fire Starter, you could go Shock Trap. Anything that gives off status effects is going to work very well on this build for different activities that you do. The only downside to that status effect build that I find is on legendary content. Unless you're using the Riot Foam, I'd say that can work very well. But when I run legendary content and I'm thinking I want a status build to crowd control, I want those crowd control skills going out as often as possible. So there is another build that was given to me many years ago by Ready to Die that I used on PlayStation. I transferred it over to PC. And again, the idea of this build is to crowd control again, but rather than focus on spreading those statuses, we're focusing on just being able to throw out our status skills as often as possible.
Good idea. It's completely mitigated by the spread of Eclipse, though. Like, why throw out all of your skills and statuses as much as possible when I could just fire it once and cover the entire room?
And this build is perfect for legendary content. So let's take a look at this one. You can see right away it looks completely different.
I see what he's going for here. I do. My concern is, again, builds for beginners, 3 improvised pieces. For a legendary CC build, I move my grid out of the way again. You want Scorpio. This time you want to run Survivalist for the amp to status affected enemies. Swap that to skill tier. 4-piece Eclipse. I've put a Hanayu piece in. We typically go with gloves, and the reason we typically go with gloves is if needed on the fly. Swap to BTSU for an overcharge if needed, and the Courier for perfect creeping death. If you can't get a decent Courier, going again with this style of setup, Hanayu for, and then obviously you want creeping death. Now, if you want to run this way and you don't have BTSU gloves either, this is the annoying part of where you will need to go improvised, and the reason we do this. Do improvised over Hanayu. If I could just quickly go back to this. So if we go skill tier, skill haste, status effect, skill haste. So with improvised, we get a skill tier, skill haste, status effect. Skill haste, this gives us 96% skill haste, as you can see here. My grid's in the way. Sorry, that's 97% skill haste. If I swap this to Hanayu, we'll drop 2%. It's not like the biggest thing ever. So yeah, it's now 95. We've dropped 2%. As to why improvised is technically better, but it's a lot of running around and hubbub for 2%. Just because, again, I don't agree with recommending improvised for beginners. We are going to skippity-doo-dah on out of here.
And finally, we have reached the end of the video with our 10th recommended build. I couldn't forget a general skill build. Skill builds are all about your skills and skill damage and letting your skills do a lot of the work. Skill builds nowadays in the Division 2 though do still allow you to have a bit of weapon damage as well, so you can still shoot your gun, you can use those skills and you can make them work together. There's some brilliant hybrid builds out there that you can use also. I'm not going to show you a hybrid today though. This build today is pure skill damage.
It's kind of a shame because the way in which hybrid skill builds are now working, they are vastly superior to just straight skill builds, and depending on how you got it set up, they're like 50 to 80% stronger. There's nothing wrong with pure skill builds if you're new to the game and learning. Pure skill builds are very good for this, but generally speaking, you will want to, at the very least, transition to a more hybridized skill build because they are just so much stronger. They really are, especially with the way in which Capacitor now works.
And it's a little bit different again to what I think people are doing, but I kind of like it. And if you are a skill build player and you want to use your skills, you're definitely going to want to have a skill build. So here it is. The Technician is a brilliant specialization to use on a skill build. For one,
he's hybridized this a little bit. He's got the main ones in, 3-piece Empress, but then you might notice that he's got 2 Brazos as well. This is, I'm assuming, Picaro's. It might not be. I think Picaro's has the red in the second slot. Could be wrong. Wyvern with glass cannon, absolutely. But he's got a red Brazos here while running Technician. So Technician is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 Brazos is 6. So he's got another 2 red here as well. So that's going to offer him more weapon damage, which is very, very useful and very, very handy.
It increases the skill damage or skill haste, whichever you prefer. But for 2, it gives you a extra skill tier. This enables you to only throw 5 skill tiers on the build, meaning that you can put a little bit more weapon damage on it if you want to. So that's what I have done here. So we've thrown on the Technician. I've got the Capacitor as my main. This is an exotic assault rifle you can get from the summit. Damage target out of cover on it, and shooting enemies will build stacks to a cap of 40. Each stack grants 1.5% skill damage. After 5 seconds, stacks will decay, but for each skill tier on your build, you're also going to get 7.5% weapon damage, so it works very well. Secondary is the mechanical animal again with future perfection, so I can proc overcharge with a kill if I want to every now and then. Sidearm don't really matter, I haven't given much thought to that. And the build looks like this. We have a Brazos mask, so because of the Technician specialization, what I've done here is I've farmed for one of these with skill haste and skill damage on, thrown a skill haste mod on it, and I've thrown weapon damage on it. So I've still got 6 skill tiers, but I had that 1-3 that I could use for the weapon damage. Brazos comes with skill haste for 1 piece and skill tier for 2 piece. My second Brazos piece is on the holster. I go with the named Picaro's holster. Once we get the extra skill tier again, but 2 because we've got weapon damage as an attribute. So again, 15% weapon damage. I've got 1 rolled with skill damage, and I've rolled skill tier onto this. Now you'll notice I've also gained another skill tier here, which enabled me to again throw some weapon damage on another piece. So I've done that with my Empress International knee pads. This has skill haste and skill damage rolled onto it. I had to farm for that to drop like that because I wanted to roll weapon damage on it. So I've currently got 2 red cores, and I've still got the 6 skill tiers, which means my Capacitor is still picking up from those skill tiers as well to increase the damage even more. Now the damage isn't great, but it is noticeable. You can use your gun and kill enemies, as I'm hoping you can see in the footage there, which is heroic content as well. So we've got 3-piece Empress on the build. That gives you skill health, skill damage, and skill efficiency, which basically is skill health, skill damage, skill haste a lot. It's a brilliant brand set for skill builds. The other Empress piece is on the gloves, which is skill haste and skill damage rolled as the attributes, and then on the backpack, which again is skill haste, skill damage as the attributes, and a skill haste mod there also. The backpack talent that I like is combined arms, where shooting an enemy will increase total skill damage by 20% for 3 seconds. As it's a
25.
build that I am going to be using my gun, as we just discussed, with all the extra weapon damage on it, you're going to be constantly be proccing this 25%. That 3 seconds refreshes every bullet. So as long as you keep on shooting, you have this buff all of the time, which is really good. There is a shout for the waveform exotic holster. You could bring that in here and switch a few things around. But the way I made the build with the extra weapon damage, I really wanted to use the Picaro's holster. Finally, we've got the chest piece. I've gone for the Wyvern chest piece because it gives you skill damage, has skill tier on it, skill haste, skill damage, and a skill haste mod, and glass cannon. All damage ideal is amplified by 25%.
Right. GC Rock is also a fan of glass cannon, so am I. However, when it comes to skill builds, glass cannon is absolutely your best choice. Nothing really comes close, and it's actually got to a point where some of the higher tier players have started farming what we call the yellow sacrifice, which basically has skill haste, skill damage, and then we obviously swap the skill tier for perfect glass cannon. It is so much more powerful, so much more. It's kind of sad, but realistically, when it comes to skill builds, there is like a genuine argument for the only chest talent that skill builds have is glass cannon, because it does so much more comparative to other talents.
All damage I take is amplified by 50, but it works very well on skill builds because this is obviously increasing your skill damage by 25% as well, which gives you a tremendous amount of skill damage. And with skills, you can sit behind cover a lot, so I feel like you can defend yourself a lot. You don't need to worry so much about the incoming damage. You can play it smart, and I think it's worth the risk because you're getting that extra weapon damage again, so you can also do well with shooting your targets, not just your skills. I really like running it this way. There's another talent that you can use. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Empathic Resolve's in my head, but I think that might be the healing one.
Probably thinking kinetic momentum.
There is another chest talent that kind of works similar to giving your skills extra damage. It's not quite as good as glass cannon in my opinion. If you don't like glass cannon, there's other talents that you can check out. And the skills are entirely up to you really. I love using the assault turret and the striker drone. I let them do most of my work while I shoot also. I've used builds like this on legendary content, heroic content. I've used it on open world content. It can be very, very fun to use, and if you do get into these builds, you'll learn your positioning and all things like that, and you can annihilate a lot of content. And there we have it, 10 builds for beginners on the Division 2. I hope this video has been helpful. Again, I see a lot of people asking what I do at level 40. There's 10 builds for you to go and farm and try out. You'll be ready for all sorts of content on the game, and you'll also be able to adjust the builds to your liking. There's so many ways you can make these types of builds. The Division 2 is so fun for that. Experiment, try them out for yourself. Let me know what you think. And if you want to give advice to people down in the video comments, if you're watching this and you're an experienced player, please go ahead. People reading through will appreciate all the advice that you can give. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe for more content. Until the next time, take care and peace.
Very good video, actually. Lots of information, lots of very good information. The vast majority of the critiques I have is mostly a difference in playstyle. I've played with GC before. I actually helped him get his, I think it's still his personal best in Legendary DUA, along with the help of Hutchler and Ronan. The main thing I saw very early on is, particularly with the groups that I play with, we tend to play kind of selfishly. Like, although we operate as a team and we utilize team buffs, etc., we also play individually. So, like, we'd go into a room, right, person 1, left side, person 2, right side, person 3, straight down the middle, person 4 is our support, do what you can, cover everyone, and then we all converge at the exit and move forward to the next area. GC Rocket's very much everyone goes in and they all sort of snake around clearing the area together. So it's two very different ways of playing. So because of that, it leads to two different styles of play. The way in which me and a few of the people I play with is, although we have all of these team buffs, we also need to be completely self-sufficient so that if X buff isn't coming through, we're still fine to deal with it. And the reason we need to be fine to deal with it is because if something does go wrong, no one's behind us to back it up. That's just how we play. Whereas with GC Rock and the way he plays with his team, if something does go wrong, there's another 3 players there to back them up with all of the buffs. They also typically tend to play a healer, which allows for a few more mistakes and for these things to happen, whereas we don't tend to play with a healer, we tend to play with a CC player. In my opinion, CC players directly, I'm talking about the Eclipse CC, are far superior, especially within things like legendary content, to a healer. Far, far superior. However, in order to utilize a CC player in that manner, you need to know spawn points, rotations. You also need a build that would be able to sustain that. Because essentially, like going back to GC Rock's striker build, I think it was, with these stats, the way in which we play, he will have someone with the close range buff. That's it. Which means that would be his crit chance. He'd get another 15% on critical hit damage, which is not going to be enough to sustain him on his own in a fight covering a door. He will die very quick, which then means the person closest to him, who's still, it's going to be quite far away, is after they've done with their door, they're now going to get shot in the back because GC Rock died, and there's a cascading effect. I suppose you could say it's less efficient if it goes wrong, but if it goes right, we can clear content in seconds faster. So it's just a different way of playing rather than him actively saying something wrong. So it depends on how you want to look at it and how you want to play. The main issues I am going to have, though, are just recommending improvised pieces to new players. 100% disagree with this, just because there's so many better things you can use your resources for. I don't agree with this. I'm not saying it's a bad build, but there's a lot better ways in which you could do this, as well for it being a league build and recommending a striker's chest. Don't agree with. And there was a lot of confusion over his CC builds. This is just a pyro build, but you still would need to change a few things up. I'm aware he likes to play in different manners, etc., but annoyingly, when it comes to a pyro build or a CC build, there's not a lot of wiggle room. There really isn't. You've either got like a good build that will help you get through content, or you've got a struggle bus situation. I like what he's trying to do here, but you could mitigate all of this, like I said,
Survivalist, Incendiary,
with just going this. This does exactly what this does, but so much easier. So much easier. But yeah, that's like my main complaints. Yeah, other than that, very good video. Lots of great information. Huge shout out to GC Rock as well as for being an absolute sport about doing this. Yeah, sorry for the longer video. It was a pretty hefty video in the first place, but yeah. 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. Have fun. Good luck. Don't die. It's bad for the health.